You've talked about collecting things and the importance of collecting things in learning about taxonomy and in observations. And you've talked about working in the basement of a museum. Did you create your own museum as well?
Oh, yeah, of course. That's part of the deal. And my father was a principal of the little university college in Leicester, which had just started, a red brick university that was totally dependent upon local philanthropy and generosity before government grants and so on. Anyway, they had distinguished lecturers came. And a Professor Gowland Hopkins, Frederick Gowland Hopkins, who was a biochemist, who was the first man to identify and in fact name vitamins, he turned up to give a lecture. And he was accompanied, being looked after by his daughter, who I thought was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in my life. I think I was 11 or something, so I hadn't seen a big range of beautiful women, but I thought, I thought she was just breathtaking, see? So after they arrived, I said to my mother in the evening, because I was staying for the overnight, I said, do you think, I said, that Miss Gowland Hopkins would like to see my museum?
Oh.
So my mother said, well, I'll ask Miss Hopkins. And in due course, she said, yes, Miss Hopkins will look at your museum. So that meant I had to rewrite all the labels, lay them out on shelves all around the house, and one thing and another. It was a very big deal. And I showed her around. And she was very nice, and she talked about this and that. Now, her name actually became Jaquetta Hawkes. She was a very distinguished archaeologist eventually. But anyway, about 3 weeks later, a huge parcel turned up about this size. And it was addressed to me. And it wasn't my birthday, and it wasn't Christmas, and I never had a parcel except on those 2 occasions. So I thought, what on earth could this be? And I opened it, and I can listen now, really, truly. I can tell you what was in it. There was a little bit of there was a shard of Anglo-Saxon pottery. There was a Roman tile. There was a seahorse. There was a shell. There was a piece of coral. There was a Roman coin, and lots more. And it was from Miss Hopkins. And she said, I did enjoy looking at your museum, and I thought you'd like to have 1 or 2 more pieces for it. Well, that was a breathtaking thing of generosity that she did. And I've never forgotten it. And when I was making that dinosaur program I mentioned earlier, we were in Africa, in the Sahara, and we came across a big brontosaur skeleton that was eroding out from the cliff. And any paleontologists here will know, you will all know, that bones, if disintegrated bone, is of no value to science or any scientist or whatever. But so you've got huge quantities of just stuff. But it is bone, it is dinosaur bone, and you can see the structures in it. So I shoveled a few shovelfuls and put them in bags, because I knew very well that when we did this paleontological program, I would get letters from children who would say, could you send me a little bit of something? So I was able to send to these children pieces of dinosaur bone. This is a real piece of dinosaur bone. And if there's any virtue in having done that, it's because of Miss Hopkins.
And she must have really encouraged you to continue your collecting and museum creating.
Yeah, she was wonderful.
And this is a question from my 12-year-old nephew. He asks, if you could be any animal, what would you like to be?
Very difficult. I mean, there are one or two, one of sexual imagination sort of plays riot with what you think you could be as you go through the sexual behavior of the smaller rodents. But I think for the sake of propriety, I'll say a sloth.
And given your incredibly active, driven life, what are the attractions of being a sloth?
Hanging around upside down, just thinking about life and not bothering about much.
So quite a contrast to this life. So we've talked a bit about you. We'll talk a bit about life in television. Come on to communication issues with communicating about nature, and end with some big concerns about the planet and make sure there's time for people to ask questions. But in terms of television, how did you learn to become such an amazing storyteller?
Well, A, thank you for the compliment, but B, I have no idea. I mean, I think all of us, I mean, we're all in the business of communicating. And when I was at an administrative post at the BBC, and I was selecting staff from one thing or another to come into a department I was running, I used to have a proper interview and then go down for a drink in the bar. And try and just be relaxed. And if the chap I was interviewing, or the woman I was interviewing, couldn't tell a funny story or muff the punchline, he wasn't going to be a producer. You know, you have to know about narration. You have to know about talking to people. And I don't know that you can learn it. I mean, I think some people do it and some don't. Can you say, I mean, you do it too, so.
Well, one of the things I love about working in television is getting to work with a producer, a director who's really good at telling stories, because I feel I've got so much to learn.
I doubt it.
Thank you. And how did you end up doing television? Was it something that you'd planned in any way?
No, I mean, I got a job in television never having seen television. I mean, 1950...
Could be an advantage.
Yes, could be now. But in 1952, I'd got a degree in natural sciences, I'd done my service in the Navy, and I decided I wasn't suited to be a research scientist. And I just didn't have the application, really. And I got a job in a publishing house, educational publishing house, which was terrible. Absolutely, I mean, the technology was Gutenberg's. I mean, it was still there. And I saw a job for a radio producer in the paper. And I thought, radio producer, that's a doddle. I mean, people come along and just talk, you know. I can do that. So I applied for it, but I didn't get it. I wouldn't even get an interview. And then I got a letter which said, we've got this other thing going on, from the BBC. We've got this other thing going on, it's called television, and it goes on in Alexandra Palace. And would you like to come and see whether you would like to be part of it? So I went up, and yes, why not? But I'd never seen a television program. And the majority of the British people in 1952 hadn't seen television. So it was, it was a tremendously exciting thing, of course, because there were a couple of dozen people, and we were responsible for all television in the United Kingdom, if not in actually Western Europe. I mean, it was extraordinary. Yeah. All live, just those two little studios. Neither of them as big as this room. Well, no, about as big as this room.